Hello artists! Today we will be learning how to work with watercolor paint. Some of the supplies we will need is recycled paper or a paper towel that we will work on when we paint. In the supply kits that were sent home, you should have received a set of watercolors, an extra paintbrush, and extra thick paper. If you do not have a paintbrush, we can use Q-tips or our fingers to apply the water and paint to our painting. If you do not have the watercolor set, we can use markers instead. If you do not have the thick paper that was sent home, you can use a paper bag or cardboard or your sketchbook. If you will be creating your painting in your sketchbook, you will want to have a piece of paper towel behind it or some recycled paper behind it. This is to make sure that the paint doesn't soak through and get paint onto the other pages of your sketchbook. We will also need a little dish of water, crayons, as well as a pencil and an eraser to be working in our painting studio today. You can go ahead and pause the video to collect your supplies. For today's watercolor skill builder, we will be creating heart designs. Go ahead and start thinking about what kind of a design you will want to make in your watercolor painting. We want to start off by creating our drawing for our painting. Go ahead and use your pencil to create where you want your paint to go in your heart design painting. Pause the video here and draw your design with pencil. Now that we've created the pencil drawing, we can go ahead and take our crayons and use those to create what will be a crayon resist. Crayon resist is when we put watercolor on top of crayon, because the watercolor will not go where we draw with crayon. Pause the video here and go over your pencil drawing with crayon. Now that we've put our crayon design on the paper, we can go ahead and start using markers to create our watercolor. First, I'm going to show you how to do the wet on wet technique with watercolor and markers. I'm going to use a brush for this first technique. So once you're done drawing with the marker, you can just go ahead and take clean water and put that over where you've drawn with marker. You'll see this color start to come out into the water and blend together. Now, to create a wet on wet look, we can take our marker and create a pattern or whatever design you would like on top of the wet paper. When we do this, we'll want to make sure that we have the marker stand up. This makes sure that all the color in the marker comes back to the tip of the marker. You might notice if you use this technique a lot that the marker tip will start to turn white. And that just means it needs to be upside down for a little bit to help the color come back to the tip of the marker. If the marker isn't spreading as much as you would want it to, you can always add a little drop of water on top of it to help it spread out a little bit. Next, I'm going to put down marker in a different area. This time I want the color to be really strong, so I'm going to make 2 lines of one color. I'm going to try using a Q-tip to spread the water and marker all around the paper. Now I'm going to try doing the wet on wet technique using my finger instead of a paintbrush or Q-tip. You might find yourself putting your finger in the water a bit more than you would with the other techniques, but that's okay. It's because our fingers don't absorb the water as well as a paintbrush or a Q-tip might. Now I'm going to add another color on top of the wet paper that I just painted. As you can tell, it looks pretty similar to when I did this technique with a paintbrush. When you are all done adding color to your painting, it might look something like this. Pause the video here and use the wet on wet technique or just regular painting with marker and color in the majority of your watercolor painting. Leave some details for when we do a wet on dry technique. To do the wet on dry technique, we want to make sure that our paper is completely dry to the touch. Pause the video here and wait until your painting is dry to continue the video. Then we get to take a new marker, and for wet on dry with marker, we will be using our marker as the wet part. And the paper is dry, so that's the wet on dry. You can use the marker to add details to your painting. Pause the video here and add detail to your painting using the wet on dry technique. Now that you're all done, you can go ahead and take a picture of your watercolor painting and put it in Seesaw for the Skill Builder activity.